All right, everybody, how you doing? Thank you for coming and listening to this presentation. What we're going to talk about is our experience with customers in heavily regulated environments and what we've seen in terms of their journey to the cloud. Office 365 specifically is what we'll cover in this session. My name is John Peluso. I'm the CTO of AvePoint Public Sector and a Microsoft Regional Director focusing on governance and compliance for typical modern workplace and modernization of collaboration. Spent a few years, quite a few years, dealing with our large commercial regulated industry customers, and have spent the last few years focusing on our public sector customers and their journey to Office 365. So while this presentation is based on some things that we saw with one of our customers, Prudential, a lot of the key concepts here are ones that we've sort of taken from our experience across all of these regulated customers that we've been dealing with. So this is where we're going in the next 20 minutes or so. Talk to you a little bit about Prudential's journey to Office 365, how they specifically were thinking about roadblocks and obstacles. As you can imagine, moving to the cloud for your core collaboration, audit teams, compliance teams need to be satisfied. So we'll talk about what they found there. What our primary contact at Prudential talked through was what he called meaningful and calculated policies. So we'll break that down in terms of what that means, and even more importantly, how to action those within the Office 365 deployment. We'll talk a little bit about change management, how they got from where they were going to where they were going next, and that is not necessarily just a technology discussion. That is also a discussion about corporate culture, inertia, things like this. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about, in their mind, where they were going next, and also some guidance for you. So how many of you, hands up, are in a regulated industry right now? Hands up if you are in a regulated industry and currently in Office 365. Okay. So hopefully some of this resonates with you. Feel free to, hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end. So if they come up, please go ahead and hang on to those, and we'll cover them at the end of the session. This is Prudential's sort of arc, where they came from and where they were going. Their first foray into Office 365 was not an uncommon one. It was personal spaces, so mailboxes and OneDrives. That's where they first started the transition to Office 365. That was back in the second half of 2016. First quarter of 2017, they start their SharePoint Online journey, specifically for some of the unique things that you could do in SharePoint Online that you couldn't do in SharePoint On-Prem, of which they were a pretty big customer. We look here, things like communication sites, right? We're a perfect example. Modern sites, things like that. Forms and Flow, or my favorite new name of the conference, Power Automate, was the next thing they went to, right? Trying to leverage some of these modernization platforms for workflow and so forth. It wasn't until, this is an interesting one too, so in Q1 of 2017, they started their SharePoint Online journey for net new things they couldn't satisfy on-prem, but they didn't really start their migration of their on-prem assets to Office 365 until Q4 of 2018. And also at the same time, their Microsoft Teams rollout began in a small way late in 2018 and in a much larger way in the first half of 2019. And in the future, Power Apps, Stream, Yammer, these are all things that they've got their mind on. So when we looked at some of the obstacles and roadblocks that they faced, first off, obviously, they're a financial services organization. So right off the bat, there are some regulations which are a must-have. So they had to satisfy those. And also what was really difficult for them was it wasn't just one set of requirements they had to meet. And this is something that we see a lot in the large global regulated industries is different laws, different regulations, different needs of the business in all the different business units. So big APAC presence with unique needs there. They had multiple Office 365 tenants, different needs, wants, right? And so that made things even more complicated. They're getting pressure from the business, right? Microsoft's doing a great job of marketing Office 365 and how it can modernize business, make things more efficient, productive. But at the same time they were getting that pressure from the end users, they were also getting their pressure back from their compliance and regulatory teams, right? They had some bad experiences in the past with Lotus Notes in terms of sprawl. They had no way to map those Lotus Notes repositories back to content owners. They had a lot of IBM connections communities and things like this that they didn't really have a good way to track. So they had learned those lessons, and they saw the prospect of Office 365 and especially the self-service provisioning models that were available in Office 365 and said, look, we don't want to hit that one again specifically. So as an example, one of the things that their compliance and regulatory teams did was say, hey, look, we have this requirement, 7-year retention, right? Now that might make sense in a purpose-built system that is holding data which is of a known quantity, and the 7-year retention makes sense, right? But think about all the different kinds of things you might be collaborating on within Office 365 across teams and sites and so forth. Is all of it relevant for a 7-year retention? And if that's true, what is that going to do to your storage, to your management, to your data grooming? Think about all those kinds of things. So what they had to do is they had to go back and challenge their compliance teams and said, let's think a little bit differently. Instead of these hard and fast and inflexible requirements, what if we think about the concept that there are different flavors of ice cream out there, right? Some of them taste better than others, right? And they all behave a little bit differently. So if I have collaboration of one type versus collaboration of a much less risky type, or a much less business important type, shouldn't I treat that collaboration differently from a compliance and a governance perspective, right? So this was something that they engaged in a journey on. Now the downside of that, it makes sense, realistically it makes sense. I had another customer, happened to be a public sector customer, and I said, you know, what kind of policies do you have for the different type of collaboration? And in this customer, it was a state, right, a state in the United States, their central IT said we have 2 kinds of data that we identify, 2 kinds of collaboration, sensitive and non-sensitive. I said, great, that's simple, let's start there. And then I said, let me see your plan for what the configurations look like for sensitive data versus non-sensitive data. And I got it, and I looked at it, and the configurations were exactly the same. And I said, that's weird, right? Is that by choice, or is that because you can't figure out how you're going to operate this at scale when you have to cover these different flavors? I said, no, it's because we can't figure out that part of it, right? Even if we built our own script-based things and power, you know, apps and flow in the back end, like, how do I handle all this branching that would need to happen in a multi-flavor environment? And that's where we got engaged with them. So what we helped them do from a technology perspective was automate the way that Office 365 is used within the organization. To the point, right? There are some things that are going to be what we call core services. They behave the same way for everybody, right? Consider low-risk internal-only collaboration between non-regulated teams. Pretty straightforward, right? And so I can offer some services to the broad population for how you get a team to do small group collaboration, non-regulated, right, within the organization only. But then what you can do is identify those different flavors, right, and offer those out, again, in an automated way, because automation is the only way that you're going to be able to do this at scale, especially consider an organization as large as Prudential, right? This kind of divisional service model, right, is a little bit reductionist. We're not talking about everything that Division A ever does is going to look and smell the same way, right? But you get the idea. I can have different services configured different ways. Division B doesn't want to use Teams at all? No problem, right? Point them to Team Sites, or point them to Yammer, or point them to something else. Division C never wants external access enabled, but Division A does? No problem. Configure the model so that teams provisioned in Division A are allowed to have that kind of external access, but Division C is not, right? So this is what we're talking about in terms of flavors. You can kind of go even further with this, right? Because What we have in the software is kind of a delegated model here where I can create as many different instances of basic services for Office 365 as I want. How does the system get used internally? And the goal is to do this. So what's a service for us? So an example of a service might be a user needs a new place to collaborate. They have some stated business goals, and based on how they respond to my questions, right, I'm going to point them to the right thing. How many of you think your users know the difference between when to use a communication site, when to use a Yammer group, and when to use a team? Right? They probably don't know that, right? But they probably have an idea of what they're trying to accomplish from a business perspective. So this is not just about gates and regulations and controls, this is also about enablement, right? Once I know what they're trying to accomplish, I can also right-size the controls that I'm putting on it, right? And even give you different flavors of those controls based on who we know about the requester, what they're trying to do, where they come from, and so forth, right? So this idea of having, first off, maybe just a static template of what the business is going to do with this particular collaboration object, but also all of the down-level orchestrated settings from there, right? And then what needs to happen is, and I'll try to make this a little bit bigger, during the provisioning process, right, I'm able to offer some options. So one of the things that, that Microsoft is realizing, we're realizing it with our customers, is empty deployments, especially Microsoft Teams. How many of you are running Microsoft Teams? Right. An empty deployment means I turn on Teams, I make it available to the population, and I Homer Simpson back into the shrubs, right? They'll figure it out. And what you see in a case like that is a tremendous spike in adoption initially, but then a fairly quick fall off because people get frustrated. What am I supposed to use this for? How is it different than email? Where did this person ping me? Why did they just add me to 7 teams, right? So without a lot of structure, this thing can get out of hand. So not only are we orchestrating the back end of all of the governance controls, I can even offer out the ability to say, here are the 4 or 5 curated Teams templates, configurations, channels, tabs, that have been identified by your division, your team, your department, as the best practice ones. Sure, you can still get your own, right? But here are the recommended ones. So these are the kinds of concepts of how we can deal with these flavors, right? So our contact at Prudential, right, these was kind of some of the things we asked him, if you were going to give sort of guidance to people who were going to go through this, what kinds of things would you tell them? And this is what he came back out with. You are going to run into roadblocks if you're not including all your key stakeholders early in the process, right? So find out what legal's concerned about. Find out what your regulatory teams, find out what your audit teams are concerned about. Because what he was challenged with was legal, audit, compliance said, you can't turn that on. Business community was desperate. You got to turn it on. I need this. We have this functionality. We're paying for it. How come we're not making any money off it, right? So got to get all those stakeholders understood. Policy-driven approaches, right? If I have an object called a policy, I can't worry about 16 granular settings, but I can coalesce 16 granular settings into a few policies. And speaking of a few, right, flavors of ice cream came from him, but he was also careful to say that this isn't an ice cream shop, right? You can get a little too out of control in terms of trying to manage all of these different flavors. So while the idea of having a right-sized approach, you should always be looking, what's the minimal number I can have to meet the needs of the organization? The other thing, and I totally agree with this, is how many of you, when you launch Teams, you launched it to the organization, you left self-service on, you said, well, let's do this for a few months, see how it goes, and then we'll figure it out from there. Anybody do that? What happens when you try to restrict people from doing something that they were able to do before, right? So the model is start small and open it up from there, right? All of my customers that say, we're going to do Teams out of box, native, no governance for 6 months, and then if we need some governance, we'll apply it. Good luck with that. Right, good luck with that. Again, the templates are more than just configurations. The templates are actually orchestrating all of the back-end controls. What are some of those back-end controls? What are the retention settings for this particular type of collaboration across messages, across files? What are my external sharing options? As we know, natively in Teams, guest access is what? It's a global switch. It's on or it's off. And if we turn it on, we have to rely on our owners to add guest users as appropriate, or we drive all of that activity through the operations team, right? And it has to go through IT. What if I could have a little more flexible model where if it was appropriate, I offer a service that either allows or disallows guest access, and I make that setting on a team-by-team basis. I can even go to the point of saying, if someone needs guest access, they don't get it immediately, because I want to go fast when it's safe to go fast, but I want to go slow when I need to go slow, right? So if you're just asking for an internal collaboration space, no problem, you get it immediately. By the way, give me these few details that I need to keep track of this thing over time, and then I'm going to orchestrate the controls on top. If you're asking me for a guest access enabled team site or whatever, right, I am going to put that through whatever the appropriate approval process is. So I can have this kind of branched approach that makes sense. Legal's happy, right? Because what if I didn't have this? I'd have to say, what is the most restrictive policy that legal is concerned about, and apply that everywhere. And that's a recipe for failure. Right? There's a lot of information here. These slides are going to be available. There's a few wordy slides in here, so you'll be able to download these slides from the Ignite session scheduler. But some guidance here about decision trees, right? How we approached, how you guide users to the right thing, as well as an understanding of the different kinds of workloads that are probably happening within your organization right now, right? So this is the solution. Our cloud governance solution is what they leverage to do these kinds of things. Basically, in this screen, we have what we call a questionnaire. I'm asking the user about their business process. And then this is the back-end configuration where I'm simply creating this branched logic. These blue boxes are the questions I'm asking. The arrows point to if they answer this way. In this case, I ask them another question. In this case, I land them in a particularly configured service. And it could be that easy, right? It could be that easy. Policy controls. You can see here we have a fairly sophisticated set of guest access settings. So in a team, again, we're going to do this per team, but the ability to say, the owners can add people outside the organization, so allow guests as members of the team. That's one flavor. Another flavor might be, I don't want them to be first-class citizens in the team, but maybe I want to share files with them. Okay, this checkbox is all about allowing external access through the SharePoint external sharing model. Any combination of the two, right? So think about the work that would be required every time a new site or team was created to do this in a non-automated way, right? It's just not possible. Change management, right? So in terms of change management, there was a journey here. Like most regulated organizations, they didn't start from nothing, right? They had a system in place that had been built for their legacy SharePoint on-prem model. And in that case, the most important thing for them during that provisioning process was to be able to do chargeback models. Over time, they said, let's see, maybe what we want to do is standardize our service delivery through ServiceNow. So if you want a new thing for Office 365, it's exactly the same as if you want any other kind of new service or new IT-related request. You go through ServiceNow. So another thing that we learned through this a long time ago with some of our early customers in this solution is that you will never be able to predict everything that the business will want to do. Even if they told you today everything they wanted to do, you'll never be able to build around that in a sustainable way. So what we did is we made sure that we had multiple ways to integrate with all of the other stuff that is unique to that one particular customer. So for example, right, we've got these out-of-the-box services, provisioning, lifecycle management, recertification, permissions review, annual attestations, right? These are all services, but at 4 points through each of those workflows, we can go out and run a custom function. What is that custom function? Who knows, right? The company will supply it. APIs, a full set of APIs for the solution so that they can have other processes initiate our processes and have our processes go initiate other processes. And then finally, integration, direct integration with third parties like ServiceNow to allow ServiceNow to be your front end of your provisioning services, and then hand off to us for the execution with all of the other logic that we've got. In terms of next steps, identifying additional manual processes that they can replicate, or that they can eliminate and automate. So now that they've got core services, provisioning management lifecycle, teams, sites, and groups, what else? What else do they want to automate? Annual attestations of permissions, right? Those are kinds of things. Lifecycle of sites, renewal of sites. And they're looking at additional governance options. So we've got them pretty much square now with their operational governance. Next step is, what about the data governance, right? What additional things can they do to protect the data that's being created, shared, and so forth in those workspaces? And there's a direct relationship between those two things. If I know what kind of collaboration is supposed to be happening in this spot, I have a much better idea, right, about how to control it. Then I don't have to worry about the outliers. Where do I have sensitive data in locations that are stated to not need to contain sensitive information? So, that's what I got. In the slideshow, what you'll see are some screenshots of the solution itself, but we're running out of time here. It's just a 20-minute session, so if you're interested in seeing some of these things in live action, AvePoint booth is 913, right over by the center hallway on the right-hand side as you walk up. We're happy to walk you through some of these technology concepts. All right, real quick, any couple of questions? I think we're at time. I'll tell you what, I'm going to be right over here. I'll hang out for a few minutes in case you guys have some things you want to cover one-on-one. But thanks again for attending. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time.